Hello traders, this is Rich from Tradesight. This is the market preview for the coming session. This is going to be for Thursday, September 26, 2013. We had a downside day across the board today where we lost a little bit of ground in all the major averages. So today we're going to give the overall ranking for the price action today is C-. It was not great, but it was also not catastrophic. Moving on to the market internally, we're actually positive as far as advanced declines go on the New York. So that's definitely going to weigh in here, and we're going to give the internals for the market today a C+. So on balance, just kind of a below average day. Didn't really get anything done too interesting technically, but a little bit happened on the Nasdaq side. We'll look at that in a moment. But let's first take a look at the broad market futures. Represented by the ES here. Here's a look at the ES futures. You can see that we did expand the range to the downside and did make a new close on this little mini impulse that started. We are now below the 10 EMA on a closing basis, so we're gonna go to short-term negative as soon as we follow through to the downside. We didn't follow through to the downside yet. That would have to happen tomorrow or later. That's why the overall look at the market is a C- and not a D. We downgraded to a D if we had followed through, changing the trend to short-term negative, but we're really not yet. So key support is going to be the 50 DMA, which is nearby here, about 1676, and is also the low of this little breakaway gap. So we didn't get down there yet. If we'd gotten all the way down to that, probably would have already gone to a D rating on price action. But for now, it's really just kind of a bid dropping rather than an outright selling environment, but that could always change. To the upside, I think the level to beat is going to be Monday's candle at 1701.5. So that's where your levels are near term here. On the Nasdaq side, the NQs did break this little mini range to the downside and just barely closed below the previous low, but we're still above the 10 EMA, so that definitely weighs into the factor of today not being all that negative, even though we were down mostly across the board. If we're to break this 10 EMA, we're definitely going to see some much more negative posturing develop in the overall market. MACD is right at the cross point, so we could see that tomorrow if we get a big enough candle to the downside. Major support is going to be in the area of this low here if we break below the 10 EMA at about 31.54. Upside resistance is going to be the high water mark of this opening from last week at about 32.38. Moving on to the bonds, the TLT, which represents the treasuries here, did push above the previous high and settle above it. So we're starting to see some momentum gather here. Also note that the MACD has now crossed above the zero line here for the first time since May, so that's a big technical development, and we're just starting to see some positive momentum develop. We're pretty high in the CCI right now. We're up to about 150, but we've got a good deal to go before we get to that plus 200 terminally overbought threshold. Taking a look at the individual sectors, XAU is a top gun by a wide margin today. We had our eye on that. For a return back to the upside, and we're definitely seeing that. The oil services, OSX, was also kind of near the top, which is definitely a positive development. But however, the transports were weak, so we didn't see that transports and the oil services kick in with strength together, which is a little bit concerning. We definitely want to see that since we've had some pretty decent weakness in the banks up until today. The BKX actually closed flat today. It's pretty hard to do, but they did it. So no real nod from that. The utilities were weak, the pharmaceuticals were weak, and the consumers, again, were very, very weak today. But let's move on and take a look at a couple of the individual charts here today. Let's start with the BTK today. The BTK made a new low close on the move. Didn't expand the range to the downside, but we are short-term negative here. Support's going to be the 50 DMA at 21.36.37, with next support is at 21.25. Which is where that 6/8 level is. To the upside now, we got to respect the 10 EMA since we're short-term negative, so resistance is going to be 21.98.99 for resistance there. Semiconductor index is still hanging tough here, just kind of basing between two key areas, between the 10 EMA and also the 8 ace level of 500. So there's really nothing new technically until we can resolve this range and make a move out of this. But for now, still short-term positive. MACD is still positive in his level, but hasn't made a cross yet to the downside. So we really just need to just resolve this little mini range to get some better direction. Here's a look at the Dow Transports. The Dow Transports did drop down to the 10 EMA today and actually closed below it. So if we get a follow through to the downside, if we take out today's low, that will qualify to change this trend to short-term negative. Hasn't happened yet, but if it does, we're going to put the 6 ace level at 65, 62, 50 in play, and then perhaps the 50 DMA. The MACD is still positive, and the CCI is very far from oversold. I'm sorry, overbought, but definitely sloping downward here. BKX is still kind of contained here within the very critical support here. We've got the 4 ace level at 62.50, and then the most important support is going to be the static trend line, which is the low of this little shallow upside in the seeker setup phase. Today was really just a measuring day, I think, measuring off the previous day's very, very strong candle to the downside. So tomorrow is definitely a better probability for downside if the market is looking for it in the BKX. So make sure you have these levels handy, and certainly if we break below $62 in this key index, you want to be looking at the FAS short and definitely the bank stock short as well. Here's a look at the XAU. The XAU is definitely positive today, but couldn't get back above the 10 EMA, so we're still short-term negative here. Have to resolve this area from being stuck here. If we get above this area, we're going to go to short-term positive. MACD is still below the zero line, it's still in a negative condition, so don't take the short side of this trade off until off of the radar until we finish this new seeker setup and potentially get this static trend line into play here. All right, here are the mini gold futures. Mini gold did have a positive day. We got up into the area of the 10 EMA, but we're still short-term and intermediate-term negative since we're below the 50 DMA and the 10 exponential moving average. Essentially, we're still in this very sloppy area here with this unresolved. The static trend line here from this seeker count to the upside is still in play, so key support is going to remain at about 1303 or so. We haven't closed below that. We're positive at least off of this seeker count until we close back below that. If we break to the upside, 1375 is definitely going to be in play here for the gold futures. Moving on to the oil futures. Oil futures did make a new low close on the move, but haven't left and lost this key area here. This low has been used 3 times now. Here's one touch, here's 2 from yesterday and today. So until we break that, we're still within this range here, and this could go either way. One thing to note though is the MACD is negative and below the zero line, so we do have downside momentum, and we have to respect that, especially since we're below the 10 EMA already. All right, folks, as always, thanks for listening. This has been Rich for Tradesight.